Summary of Good Country People by Flannery O'Connor. The story starts by telling about Mrs. Freeman, a farm worker in the countryside of Georgia. Mrs. Hopewell, who hires Mrs. Freeman, starts the morning routine by turning on the gas heater. Her daughter Hulga then goes into the bathroom, shuts the door, and stays there until Mrs. Freeman arrives and their small talk is almost over. Hulga feels constant outrage in the presence of her mother and Mrs. Freeman's non-stop small talk. "That's life," is one of Mrs. Hopewell's favorite sayings, and it shows how dull her talk is. Mrs. Freeman agrees with Mrs. Hopewell no matter what she says. Mrs. Hopewell thinks that Mrs. Freeman is one of the good country people, which she compares with the trash workers who have caused her trouble in the past. Mrs. Hopewell has tried to get her daughter, Hulga, to work, but Hulga's attitude has been so bad and rude that Mrs. Hopewell has given up. Mrs. Hopewell doesn't mind her daughter's bad mood because Hulga lost her leg in a shooting accident when she was 10 years old. Because of her prosthetic leg, Hulga never danced a step or had any normal good times. Hulga's first name was Joy when she was born, but when she turned 21, she changed it to Hulga to get back at her mother. Hulga is proud of the things she breaks that her mother thinks are pretty. Mrs. Hopewell is sorry she let Hulga go back to school to get a PhD. Hulga is 32 years old, but because of a heart problem, doctors think she will only live to be 45. She wants to travel and give talks at colleges, but she can't because she is sick. She is bored with her everyday life, and when her mother tells her to smile more, she tells her, "Woman, do you ever look inside? Ever look at yourself and see what you're not?" God. Hulga went to graduate school to study philosophy, and now she spends most of her time reading and going for long walks. She doesn't care much about guys because she thinks most of them are dumb and ignorant. We find out that a Bible salesman came to the Hopewell home the day before, and the reporter then tells us what happened. The Bible salesman came and seemed sincere and polite. Mrs. Hopewell let him in, and he told her he was there to sell Bibles that he kept in a valise. He said that their living room didn't have a Bible, which Mrs. Hopewell said was Hulga's fault. Then Mrs. Hopewell lied to the Bible salesman and told him that she always has a Bible by her bed. He demanded that every family should have a Bible in the room, but Mrs. Hopewell refused and told him it was time for him to leave. But he said that he was just a country boy and that people like you don't like to mess with country people like me. This made her feel bad enough to let him stay. He said his name was Manly Pointer, and Mrs. Hopewell said she liked good country people. When Hulga came home ready for dinner and told her mother to get rid of the Bible salesman told Hulga that he has a heart condition. Hulga started to cry because she thought they both had the same problem. She told him he had to come to dinner. When the Bible salesman talked to Hulga at dinner, she claimed not to hear him. He told his hosts about his youth and how, when he was 8 years old, his father was killed by a falling tree. Hulga got up from the table, but Mrs. Hopewell stayed and listened to the Bible salesman talk for 2 hours before telling him she had to leave. When the Bible seller went outside, Hulga was in the road waiting for him, and they talked. Mr. Hopewell could see them, but he couldn't hear what they were saying. She did see Hulga take him to the gate with him. Back in the present, Hulga is waiting for the Bible salesman on a Saturday morning. They decided to meet at 10 a.m. the night before. She told him she was 17 years old. The night before, on the way to the gate, he told me that he thought of himself as a serious person who was very aware of his own death. Hulga said that she was the same and that she felt like she knew him. Then he suggested that the next day they have a lunch. She dreamed about seducing him while she slept. At 10 a.m., when Hulga gets to the gate, no one is there. She starts to wonder if he'll show up at all, but then he does. He is carrying Bibles in his bag. As they walk, he asks Hulga where her prosthetic leg connects to her body, which upsets her. Then, when she says she doesn't believe in God, he says he doesn't believe her. He gives her a kiss at the edge of the woods. Hulga has never been kissed before, so he thinks it's nothing special. The Bible salesman complains that they can't go up to the loft because Hulga's leg is missing. She feels hurt and gets up right away. The Bible salesman tells Joy he loves her as they kiss. He wants her to say the same thing about him. She says, "I don't use the word love. I don't have dreams. I'm one of those guys who can't see through to anything." She tells him that she feels sorry for him. He finally gets her to say that she loves him in a way. She tells him she is 30 years old and has a college degree. The Bible salesman asks her to show him where her fake leg links to the rest of her body to prove that she loves him. When she says no, he says she is trying to trick him. Helga then pulls up the sleeve of her pants and shows him, taking the leg off and putting it back on again. The Bible salesman then takes it off, even though Helga tells him to put it back on. After that, the Bible salesman starts kissing her again. When she pushes him off, he pulls one of his Bibles out of his suitcase and opens it, showing that it is hollow inside. It has a flask of booze, a deck of sexual cards, and a box of condoms in it. Helga is shocked when he offers her a drink of the whiskey. She asks over and over again to get her leg back. She says that even though he lies, he is the perfect Christian. He laughs at her for thinking he was a real Christian, grabs her leg, and, as he comes down from the loft, tells Helga that he has a whole collection of things he stole in the same way and that his real name is not Manly Pointer. He tells her, "You're not so smart. I don't believe in anything since the day I was born." While they are working, Mrs. Hopewell and Mrs. Freeman watch the Bible salesman walk from the woods to the street. Mrs. Hopewell knows him, so she thinks he was selling Bibles. She and Mrs. Freeman agree that they could never be as simple as the Bible salesman.
About the author. Flannery O'Connor was born to a real estate agent and his wife in Savannah, Georgia. A film about O'Connor's trained chicken made her famous at 6. When O'Connor was a teenager, her father was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus. Several years later, he died from the disease. After studying social sciences at the Georgia State College for Women, O'Connor was accepted into the highly competitive fiction graduate program at the Iowa Writers' Workshop. In 1951, she was told she had the same disease that had made her father sick and killed him. She went back to her family's old farm in Milledgeville, Georgia, to live with them. O'Connor was only supposed to live for another 5 years, but she lived for 14 more. Until the end of her life, she continued to write a lot, give talks, raise birds, and travel. She wrote 2 books, 2 collections of short stories, and a lot of essays over the course of her work. Her work has won many awards and prizes, and she is now considered one of the most important writers of the 20th century.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.